direct flight from Algiers to Geneva was inaugurated Saturday by the Swiss airline company Swiss, officials said at a press conference Saturday in Algiers. Central Trade Algeria Trade Port project to be carried out between the towns of Cherchell and Tunis has been estimated at about 200 billion Algerian dinars. And top US and Iranian officials have said hard work was still needed as they met in Austria for what could be their final negotiations to bridge significant differences on an agreement to curb Iran's nuclear program. Hello ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Dzair News and welcome to this English news edition. First in our news, a regular direct flight from Algiers to Geneva was inaugurated Saturday by the Swiss airline company Swiss, officials said at a press conference Saturday in Algiers. Siham Sadou reports.
A regular direct flight from Algiers to Geneva was inaugurated Saturday by the Swiss airline company Swiss, ex-Swissair, officials said at a press conference Saturday in Algiers. The Swiss airline, created after Germany's Lufthansa brought ex-Swissair, returns to Algeria after 20 years of absence and will operate 3 Algiers-Geneva flights a week, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. According to the CEO of Swiss, Lorenzo Stoll, one of his company's return objectives in Algeria is to meet not only the demand of the Algerian community in Switzerland, but also that one of the Swiss wishing to travel to Algeria. We decided to open this airline since we witnessed it whole in our destinations. It is important to open an airline to Algiers to be one of the gateways into Africa. Present at the press conference, the Swiss ambassador in Algeria, Muriel Berest-Koren, said that the inauguration of this flight would enable to increase and facilitate the flow of communities between the two countries, especially for businessmen. For his part, chairman of the Algerian Swiss Industry Chamber, Alain Roland, stressed the importance of economic relations between Algeria and Switzerland, adding that the company's return would help promote them further. He also argued that the opening of the airline could encourage the development of tourism sector in Algeria.
Central Algeria Trade Port projects to be carried out between the towns of Cherchell Tipaza and Tunis has been estimated at about 200 billion Algerian dinars. The major facility project, to be executed in 3 stages in 10 years, will not be financed by the government. Minister of Transport Boujamaa Talhi said, adding that the detailed design study is still underway. The Ministry of Transport is studying the financing modes. Talhi considers the port project as a priority given the urgent need to raise port capacity in the country's center, which will not be able to meet the growth of traffic expected by 2050. According to forecasts, port traffic in this area is expected to reach 35 million tons of goods a year and 2 million food containers a year. 30% of such a volume dealt with now in the port of Algiers and Tunis. The new port is due to stretch over 1,000 hectares with a logistic area of 300 hectares. Algeria is considered as one of the world's biggest consumer of bread, but at the same time, big amounts of that bread go straight to the garbage as lots of families overstate their purchase of bread. Usama Snusi reports.
Algerians are considered of the world's biggest consumers of bread, with 500 grams to 900 grams a day for each person. In the same time, they are the world's biggest wasteful people for this material as well, with quantities ranging between 150 to 200 grams a day per person. The phenomenon of wasting bread increases for more than a half in the month of Ramadan comparing to ordinary days. In the first week of the holy month, more than 60 million wasted loaves of bread were registered.
People should buy according to the number of family members they have. People buy bread and put it in the freezer and finally throw it in the garbage. We didn't do this in old days. They're wasting bags of bread. Go check the suburbs. You'll find tons of it because people always put extra.
The price of bread in our country is the cheapest in the world thanks to the government's support. However, the Algerians did not really appreciate the value of this support. They even met it with waste and extravagance.
We don't finish a single loaf of bread during Ramadan. People go outside fasting and they crave bread and other stuff. That's why they buy a lot.
Women would warn their husbands about buying lots of bread.
A big waste in acquisition versus massive extravagance, and ultimately a phenomenon that requires intervention. And as a first step, we should change our consumption behavior, as we should launch some rationalization campaigns and strict laws against any misdemeanant.
After a week of deliberations since Tuesday at the premises of Blida Criminal Court, the last meeting of Al Khalifa trial will be Monday, where civil parties are expected to be compensated. Siam Sadu reports.
After the announcement of the final verdict towards Mumin Khalifa, ex-owner and manager of Khalifa Group, the criminal court will reach the last phase from the murky file. The civil party will expect refund from all the bank loan deposits in Khalifa accounts tomorrow, Monday. The civil party, who requested last Tuesday afternoon, asking the presiding judge Antal Mnowar to apply the law and reimburse all the parts who claim firmly their refund. 132 members of civil parties are concerned in the Khalifa bankruptcy. Among them, private and public institutions, notably state and management agencies from different provinces, who poured huge amounts of money into Khalifa account, the National Company of Wales Digging, the enterprise of Oran Port, water supply enterprise in Algiers, and so many institutions that expect their refund tomorrow. In fact, the victims from the civil parties claim to be reimbursed from the money they lost from Khalifa Bank. Some of them requested billions of credit they could not obtain since 2003, even though the former Khalifa Bank liquidator Monsef Batsi made several attempts in order to achieve the refund operations.
Moving on to regional news, no to terrorism was the message from Tunisia's crowds marched through Sousse a day after a gunman killed 39 foreigners in the resort town. Meanwhile, armed police are patrolling Tunisia's beach resorts after the government said it would deploy hundreds more inside hotels after Friday's attack. Karim Fazak reports.
No to terrorism was the message from Tunisia as crowds marched through Sousse a day after a gunman killed 39 people in the resort town. Gathered at the Hotel Imperial Marhaba, the site was targeted by the attacker named by official as 23-year-old Saifuddin Rezki. Crowds then took to the streets to denounce the shootings, which were claimed by the group calling itself Islamic State. A separate demonstration was held in the capital, Tunis. Others confirmed dead were from Germany, Belgium and Ireland. There are also thought to have been Tunisian victims. Tunisia's Prime Minister Habib Assid has vowed to step up security at tourist sites. He announced army reservists would be deployed, while 80 mosques accused of inciting violence are expected to be closed in the week following the attack. After an emergency meeting late on Saturday, Interior Minister Najm Warsali promised new steps to ensure the protection of Tunisia's tourist sites and beaches by armed police units. The government also confirmed that it would stop all Tunisian men below the age of 35 from traveling to Libya. Thousands of tourists have left Tunisia since the attack, which has shocked the North African country that relies heavily on tourism for jobs and foreign currency revenues. In recent years, militant Islamists have gained strength in Tunisia, despite a transition to democracy following the 2011 uprising against autocrat former leader Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali.
Kuwait has identified the bomber who carried out a deadly suicide attack in Shiite mosque as a citizen of Saudi Arabia who arrived in the small Persian Gulf nation just hours before blowing himself up, the Kuwaiti Interior Ministry said on Sunday. Kuwaiti authorities also arrested a local man who had driven the car that dropped the bomber off and the Kuwaiti owner of the house where the driver was hiding, the Interior Ministry said, adding that the house's owner followed a deviant ideology. Top US and Iranian officials have said hard work was still needed as they met in Austria for what could be their final negotiations to bridge significant differences on an agreement to curb Iran's nuclear program. Usama Snusi reports.
Disagreements remain between US, European and Iranian diplomats as they hammer out a deal to curb Iran's nuclear program.
We have a lot of hard work to do. There's some very tough issues, but that depends on a lot of things.
But talks in Vienna must go on as self-imposed June 30th deadline looms. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said Western powers want a deal that recognizes Iran's right to civilian nuclear power, yet guarantees Iran give up any nuclear weapons capability.
For this, we think there are at least 3 essential conditions. The first is a lasting limit on Iran's research and development capacity. The second condition is a rigorous inspection of sites, including military if needed. And the third condition is the automatic return of sanctions if it violates its commitments. These 3 conditions respect Iran's sovereignty.
Britain's foreign minister also stressed that no deal from Iran is better than a bad deal few days before the deadline.
Many times before, and I'll say again today, no deal is better than a bad deal. There are red lines that we cannot cross, and some very difficult decisions, tough choices are going to have to be made by all of us if we're going to get to this deal over the next few days.
Iran insists that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only. And Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is pressing for sanctions on his country to be removed immediately.
The other side needs to implement and abide by its commitment, particularly on the removal of sanctions. All of the sanctions, economic and financial sanctions, need to be removed immediately, and sanctions, Security Council sanctions, must also be terminated immediately.
But the pace and timing of sanctions relief are among the biggest sticking points in the talks. US and European negotiators also want to ensure there is a mechanism for restoring those sanctions, yet Iran fails to meet its end of the bargain.
Greek banks and the stock exchange will be shut on Monday after creditors refused to extend the country's bailout and savers queued to withdraw cash, taking Athens' standoff with the European Union and the International Monetary Fund to a dangerous new level. Greece's banks, kept afloat by emergency funding from the European Central Bank, are on the front line as Athens moves towards defaulting on a €1.6 billion payment due to the International Monetary Fund on Tuesday. In science-related news, a spacecraft meant to carry valuable supplies to the International Space Station exploded in the Atlantic shortly after its launch. Amin Mzdoua reports.
NASA, the U.S. Space Agency, and the future of private spaceflight suffered an enormous setback this afternoon, following the disintegration of an unmanned rocket shortly after its launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida. The Falcon 9 spacecraft, which was contracted by NASA from private company SpaceX, was carrying, among other things, much-needed supplies for the 3-man crew of the International Space Station, a series of experiments to be conducted by the crew as they orbit around the Earth, as well as the very first docking port designed for future private commercial crew capsules. This represents the 3rd failed cargo mission for the International Space Station in 8 months, with the crew now having to fall back on emergency contingency plans. At a press conference held earlier this afternoon, NASA's top spaceflight official, William Gerstenmaier, claimed, however, that there was no immediate cause for concern, as the space station's current reserves of food and water should hold until October, with plans scheduled for Japanese and Russian supply launches to occur before then. The CEO of the California-based SpaceX, Elon Musk, tweeted following the doomed launch that the explosion was caused by a buildup of pressure in the liquid oxygen tank of the rocket's upper stage. The private company, whose Falcon 9 rockets had a sparkling safety record up until this point, with 18 straight successful launches, including 7 prior resupply runs for NASA, will now lead an investigation under the oversight of the Federal Aviation Authority to determine the exact circumstances surrounding the incident. While this investigation is pending, there will be no Falcon 9 launches in the immediate future.
The end of our English news edition. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.